Hi, I'm Mary Wing Soares, and I'm here with Tim Thompson for another edition of Agenda Item. We missed last month. We had a very short month.
We had a short month and a lot of weather
Yes.
in January, which played havoc with our schedule, and we managed to get everything done in one meeting. We had to combine two meetings in February due to the weather, but we're moving forward into March, and we are back on a two-meeting schedule this month. We do have two meetings, the first on March 2nd, and our second meeting will be on March 9th. We have three new plans for March 2nd. The first is actually a design review meeting. This is for RHP Investments. They had been into the planning board back in December to have a conceptual discussion about reuse of the former South Fire Station at the corner of National Road and Buttrick Road. They have submitted some plans and information. They have since withdrawn the project back to design review. They originally were going to be on the agenda for February 2nd. However, there's a number of issues that we've identified as staff that we need some planning board guidance on, and the applicant wants to get some additional feedback from the board before they move forward. So we'll spend a fair amount of time discussing the expectations of the board and how we move forward on this project.
Because when you have a building that's already there, and you have somebody that wants to go into that building, it's not as simple as walking in the door and starting your business.
Unless it's the exact same use as what it was previously, any change of a use requires site plan review and approval by the planning board under our regulations.
And as a fire station before, this is obviously a huge change of use
Correct.
to going into an office space, right?
And in this particular circumstance, you're talking about a very unique piece of property. It's a little over 1/10 of an acre in size. It's extremely undersized. The building takes up the majority of the lot. There's very little space actually for parking. The septic system, when the fire station was there, they actually had a cesspool, which does not meet any of today's septic requirements. So there's the need to construct a new septic system for the new use. So there's a variety of different things that will need to be discussed with the board and the applicant before they move forward. And hopefully we'll work out through a variety of waivers and other things, get this back into use and put it back on the tax rolls. It's certainly our goal to get a productive use of the facility. But at the same time, we need to protect the community at large in the interest of the town in general.
Absolutely.
The next item on the agenda is a lot line adjustment between Chinberg Builders and Waste Management of New Hampshire. This is a two-part project. The next two agenda items on the March 2nd meeting both relate to this particular project. Back last summer, the Planning Board and the Town Council conditionally rezoned this large piece of property, map 16, lot 38, from split-zoned industrial and residential to residential, conditioned upon the lot line adjustment and subdivision eventually being approved by the board. So this is the first step in that, which is the lot line adjustment. This is the waste management facility that's accessed off of Liberty Drive, and the large parcel that will eventually be for residential use, which will be accessed off of Old Dairy Road. Essentially, they're exchanging I want to say it's about 2.5 acres of land from the Chinberg parcel into the waste management parcel, which will accommodate some future expansion for the waste management facility. And in turn, waste management is going to grant a sewer easement over their property so they can provide municipal sewer through a private sewer service provider into the project itself. So it's a relatively simple first step. There is a slight complicating factor on this one that we'll need to go back to the town council because there's actually an old Class 6 road that was discontinued subject to gates and bars back in 1932, but never totally abandoned. So they'll have to go back to the council for a final abandonment of that particular roadway so that it doesn't impact the project.
And it should just be procedural, right?
It should just be procedural. It's just a matter of making sure the research is done that there aren't any other parcels with access off of that particular portion of the road. But ultimately, we don't foresee any major issues with that moving forward. The larger of the two projects is actually the subdivision itself. This is, again, the large parcel off of Old Dairy Road. This is the first phase of what ultimately will be about 132 lots. This is the first conservation subdivision proposed under our conservation subdivision ordinance that was adopted by the town back in 2005. Essentially, you're looking at the first 50 lots for residential development, which will be accessed off a new roadway and a new cul-de-sac with a temporary emergency access drive in order to have, in the interim period, two means of access into the parcel in case of an emergency. And then the 51st lot will be the remaining open space, which will be further subdivided in future phases when they come into the planning board. We're excited to finally see this project move forward. It's the first time somebody's utilized this section of our ordinance that was written again back by a former intern, Holly Burby, who has since moved on to bigger and better things down in Maryland and is now back in the state as a stay-at-home mom. But she did some tremendous work in putting together this ordinance, and as well as the work with the Conservation Commission and Planning Board. It's our hope that this type of development would be the model moving forward for larger residential projects so that we can preserve open space as well as providing accommodation for residential growth in the future as well.
So this is something we saw a while ago.
We did.
Come in as it was
conceptually back, I want to say, the early spring of last year. The rezoning for the parcel, I think, was approved by the council back in the summer. I think it was July.
And we did have some residents that abut this subdivision come in and speak.
Yep.
And we did, I believe, we did answer their questions to their satisfaction. But if anybody has any other questions, they should come to, and speak to us.
There's a lot of things to be discussed on this because it's the type of development it is. It's going to be serviced by a private sewer provider, so there's some intricacies in setting up that type of arrangement with the private service provider. We have one similar situation, the Mill Pond development up off of Auburn. Actually, it's further up Old Derry Road heading towards the city of Manchester. They have a private sewer provider. There's the process of setting that up through the Public Utilities Commission. There's the open space management and open space documents that need to be put together. So this may take a couple of meetings just to get through the complexity of the requirements of the ordinance and the particular style of development that it is.
Now, is it usual that they would have a group that would oversee that, a management company that would oversee that for
It will literally be a
subdivision?
private utility company will be established in order to provide private sewer into this area. Because this particular parcel is not part of the town's sewer facility plan, the town is not going to be providing service to the there'll be access to the town's facility outside of the project, but within the project itself it will be a completely private public utility that will provide the sewer service to these lots.
Well, and that's why we have staff, to make sure that we get all the, T's are crossed and I's are dotted.
That's really the environmental division of the Public Works Department is working on that, and we do have that one example, like I mentioned, with Mill Pond, and it's just a matter of...
And that's been very successful?
It's been pretty successful. They haven't built out that project entirely. In fact, you'll actually be seeing, it's a few months in the future, an expansion of the Mill Pond project. There was an area of that project that was designated for a future PRD, but since we don't have PRDs anymore, they'll actually be coming in for our second conservation subdivision for an expansion of that project.
And PRD is?
PRD was planned residential development. That was our former, what we call cluster ordinance that allowed for smaller lots for protecting open space, which was then rewritten in 2005 to our conservation subdivision ordinance.
Okay. So this is exciting that we're starting to see some development happening.
It is. It's certainly, especially on the residential front, we haven't seen any major residential development of any size other than a couple lots here and there, probably for about 4 years. So this is really the first non-age restricted residential development of any size we've seen in quite some time.
And how many homes will be in this subdivision?
This initially will be 50 in the first 2 phases. They're allowed 25 units per year under our phasing ordinance. So this 50 lots will cover the first 2 years of development. During that time, depending on the success of the project, they'll move forward and design future phases.
Right.
But ultimately, the concept that was presented to the planning board was about 136 lots total.
Great.
And over 70% of the land will actually be conserved as open space.
That's exciting.
It is.
That's really nice.
Especially for open space that we don't have to pay and fee for.
Exactly.
So that covers the first meeting of the month. Our second meeting, we have 4 items on the agenda. The first is actually a continued project that will likely be requesting their 3rd continuance. That was the T-Mobile cell tower off of Kelly Road. Their engineer and attorney have been working to address the comments that we had. We had a meeting with staff and their engineer about a week and a half ago. They were unable to meet the deadline to submit the revised plan, so we expect that they'll be requesting a continuance to the April 12th meeting. After that, we get into our continued workshop discussions on the Woodmont Commons PUD. Don't have a whole lot of new information to present on that. Ultimately, the last meeting we had with them back in January, there was some back and forth between staff, the board, and the applicant as to how we want to move forward on this. The major focus, I think, at this point has to be breaking the plan down into smaller chunks and looking at specific land uses so we can determine what the board is comfortable with in terms of the land use plan. And once we start locking down the land use plan, then we can start talking about traffic and drainage and infrastructure and all those types of things. So really the next step I expect will be this meeting, and perhaps one more meeting would be nailing down some sort of agreement in terms of what the appropriate land uses are for the project.
And they have stepped up and created some designs, some pictures, some traffic studies, some, you know, many of the things that we asked for, and they are opening their doors on Thursday evenings and on Saturday mornings.
Thursday evenings and Saturday mornings, and in fact, it'll be already over by the time people see this on TV, but tonight they are having an open house at 7 o'clock over at the former Orchard packaging facility, where they're going to unveil some of their plans and information that they're hoping to present and refine for the planning board meeting in March.
Great.
After that, we get into, go back to my agenda here, our public hearing on the zoning ordinance for the impact fee methodology that we talked about in our last show, which we discussed back in January. This is to update the Route 28 impact fee for the western segment from I-93 to the Manchester line. I'm not going to completely go over the same thing I went over last time, but again, we're doing this because we haven't updated that study or the fee since 2001, and obviously the costs of improvements and the traffic has changed significantly since then. The two things that are being proposed for changes that we'll need recommendations of the planning board on are, one, to update and adopt that new impact fee methodology, and then secondly, to update a section of the zoning ordinance that refers to our methodology documents. So that section of the ordinance is actually section 1261. It's simply adding the words prepared by the Community Development Department, Stantec, and Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission, which refers back to that methodology, which the board and the council will have to adopt separately. The area we're talking about, again, is broken down basically from I-93, Route 28, all the way to the Manchester line. The map I have up on screen now shows the different development areas. Those are the large vacant parcels where we anticipate development will occur over the next 10, 20, 30 years. Again, we did some analysis of the existing trips in 2011, looking at those built out over the next 10 years or so. And then developed our trip generation summary. We're expecting roughly about 4,000 new trips to be generated by those development areas. Looking at how that looks in the year 2021, 45% of the traffic on that section of Route 28 will be existing traffic and background, or actually that would be today's existing traffic. 16% will be new background growth, which is just natural progression and increase in traffic from other areas of town. And then 39% of that will be the area generated within the corridor, studied by this particular methodology that would generate those new 4,000 trips. The new cost breakdown, we're expecting that the improvements that are contemplated would be about $20 million. The town and state share of that would be 61% based on that breakdown of traffic, and then the new development would be responsible for 39% of that. We've also recommended some cost escalations beyond the year 2011. And we also, this is probably the new part of what I'll be presenting to the board. There was some concern when we met back in January about the impact of that impact fee increase. It would be about 119% if we based it purely on the increase in costs. So what we've developed is 3 different options for implementing that impact fee increase, and we're going to be recommending that the board choose one of those 3 options before they recommend the amendments to the council. The first would be just purely based on the methodology, which would mean today's impact fee would go from $912 to $1,998 this year, then increase up to $2,313 in the year 2016. The second option is an incremental implementation over a 3-year period, basically charging 50% of the increase in the first year, 75% in the second year, and then 100% from there on. That would knock it down, the increase from $912 up to $1,189 in the first year, then up to $1,836, and then progressing as it was in the first schedule. Excuse me. The third option, which is probably the more gradual option, is actually a 4-phase implementation, which is a 50%, 60%, 75, and then 100, so that we go from $912 to $1,189 to $1,469 to $1,890, and then per the methodology, the cost that would have been in the last 3 years.
Now, Tim, in your studies, when you worked with Southern New Hampshire Planning and you did this work. Did you look at other areas around us?
We don't, because it's specific purely to this unique area, because it's based purely on what the specific improvements are needed to Route 28 and the intersections and the development specifically within that area.
Okay.
Looking at other towns and cities, their studies are going to be completely different based on whatever improvements are needed for their town and their roads and the amount of development they foresee.
Right.
So this type of impact fee study is really specific only to the community that it's being proposed in. It's not an apples to apples comparison you can make from town to town.
And, you know, I would ask that if I was wanting to build someplace, my expectation would be that I would have to pay today's dollars for the cost. So, you know, I know I'm one vote on the planning board, but as far as I'm concerned, the fact that we haven't been, you know, we haven't updated it, it doesn't preclude the fact that this is how much it costs.
It is. I think the concern is shared somewhat by staff that was raised, that such an increase in impact fees may hamper slightly our economic development efforts to try to attract development to this area. In terms of where that lies in the list of concerns from a developer standpoint, I'm not sure how high that would rank. But at the same time, we have had conversations with one particular project that was just submitted the day before this was posted for public hearing, and he did that purely because he wanted to make sure he was in before the impact fees were proposed to be increased.
Right. And I'm sure, you know, every penny counts.
Sure.
But on the other hand, we have an obligation to the town. So it'll be a discussion.
It'll be a discussion, and in terms of doing things like this, I know the city of Concord, again, we're comparing different towns in terms of what their impact fees are, but they had a very similar situation where they hadn't updated their traffic impact fees for 4 years. The planning department in Concord had proposed, you know, this is the cost now, here's what the fee should be. And ultimately the city council there chose an incremental increase where they charged about 40% in the first year, 80% in the second year, and then moving forward to 100%.
I mean, and you do eventually catch up. It's just how quickly do you want to catch up.
And the fact that we went 10 years without any impact to the increase of the costs, I think doing a gradual approach, taking 3 years is certainly a reasonable approach for the town to take in moving forward in a project like this.
Now, when we're looking at impact fees, have we updated the ones along 102?
Those are all things that we've had in our capital improvements program that have not been funded to utilize consultant services to help us assist with that project. If we, moving forward, don't receive funding for that, it'll be a very similar situation to this, that as time permits, myself, along with Andre and the other staff members, will take a look at it and try to do an in-house impact fee study. But those do take a fair amount of time, given the other work that's being going on within the office. So.
Right. And given Woodmont, though, shouldn't we be looking at that more specifically?
We probably will. I think that in the case of Woodmont, there's probably going to be specific improvements that are going to be on their dime because they would be causing the impacts to take place. So in all likelihood, they probably won't be paying much, if any, impact fees because they'll be doing the actual improvements to 102 in those intersections. Right. So in those types of situations, it's not as critical, especially if we know there's going to be improvements proposed. Right. Because the way our impact fee system works is if you do work that's consistent with the corridor study and you improve an intersection and say the cost of the intersection is $300,000, your impact fee calculation was $200,000 because you actually spent more on the improvements than you would have paid in impact fees. You get credited that impact fee. And
they don't get rebated the difference.
They do not.
Let's just make that really clear.
The last item on our agenda for the 9th is a conceptual discussion. This is map 2, lot 27, heading out off of Route 102 towards the Hudson Town line. Also has access on West Road. This is a large parcel of land that is being proposed for potential single-family elderly housing development. Massetti Corporation, who's currently doing the construction at the Nevins project. They're close to wrapping that up, and they've enjoyed working in Londonderry and have been looking for the last couple of years for another site to do another similar type of project. So they're looking at this particular parcel off of Route 102 and West Road. Has been previously proposed as a multifamily elderly housing project several years ago. It's been sitting dormant for many years. This was actually a site that was also looked at as a potential affordable elderly project when Joe DeCarolis is looking at particular parcels. But ultimately, none of those have come to fruition. We're going to another conceptual discussion. This would be two parts. One would be subdividing the lot into 3 new lots. 2 lots that would front on Route 102 would be remain in our performance overlay district for commercial development. The remainder of the parcel would still remain POD. There's no rezoning needed for this, but elderly housing is allowed in our performance overlay district, so they'd be looking at doing 94 single-family elderly housing units throughout the entirety of the parcel.
And our ordinance says 55 and older and no children under...
The ordinance itself doesn't specify how you do an elderly housing project. There are 2 types of elderly housing. There's the 55 plus and then there's 62 plus. Under the state and federal fair housing law, a 55 or older community can have 80% of its units having one person 55 or older, but it does not restrict who else lives there, and 20% of those units could be open to anybody. The way it's typically worked in Londonderry is, in order to be eligible for an impact fee waiver for school-age children and for the for the phasing requirements of our ordinance, if you restrict it to 100% 55 and older occupants, you can get an exemption from our phasing ordinance and you can get waiver to the impact fee. If a developer chooses not to do that, they would pay a prorated share of the impact fee and they would be subject to the phasing ordinance, which in this case would limit you to 15 units per year. So the great likelihood is that they will either restrict it to 100% elderly occupants, or if in the situation of the Nevins, when they went through that project, they actually went to the zoning board to get a variance from the phasing requirements, and they basically stated they wouldn't have anybody under the age of 23 living in any of the units, because at age 22, that's when the school system is no longer required to educate the children, so they weren't subject to a school impact fee in that particular case. With this particular parcel, there are some wetlands. This is adjacent to the Nessunkeag Brook and some named wetlands in the northern part of the property where there's very little actual development proposed. There's a small clubhouse, a tennis court, and some recreational amenities in that portion of the property. There is an existing monopole cell tower in the middle of the property that's been there for many years.
So nobody has to worry about
You won't have to worry about cell service if you're in this development, that's for sure.
And Comcast is right next door, so you won't...
Correct, you should be able to get cable pretty easily
there
as well. But again, one of the concerns we had in going through different concepts with the developer, of the engineer on this, is the concern that this would become a cut-through to West Road. We're relatively pleased with the design that's been put forth. Because of the cell tower, it actually makes that a little easier, because there's a setback requirement of the tower height plus 10 feet to any structure within that area. So there's basically a radius around that cell tower where you can't put anything. And that
how tall is the cell tower?
I believe that cell tower is, 180 feet.
So they have to have 190 feet?
I believe that's the setback requirement, around from the center, from the
radius.
From the radius from the cell tower itself. So in that case, what you end up with is a large circle around that, which there's no way you're going to be able to speed through. We estimate that that's going to probably be designed for a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, as well as making sure that the road coming off of West Road, the predominant through movement is not towards Route 102, it's actually to a cul-de-sac. So it actually does a pretty good job of preventing and making a cut-through not a real convenient alternative.
It's not going to seem like an obvious cut-through.
Correct.
At all.
And we're also pleased to see that they're reserving some room on Route 102 for commercial development at some point in the future, because that is ultimately what the the primary use of the performance overlay district is.
Well, it might make sense for them to have like a 7-Eleven or some kind of convenience store there.
It could be.
For, you know, you've got a lot of
the major challenges for any project in this part of town is you're pretty remote in terms of access to municipal sewer. There is no sewer access anywhere in this part of town. They are working with Pennachuck, which is the water provider in this particular part of the town, to construct a connection from the town of Hudson to the project, and potentially actually looping that with another development here in Londonderry that's currently having some issues with their public community wells. So there'll be some benefits of some other projects in Londonderry as well from water line extension here. So that pretty much covers what could be a pretty busy month.
Right. Sounds good. I mean, it's nice to see that, as I said, it's nice to see that we're getting some housing starts. And things seem to be picking up a little bit. Hopefully the economy, as it continues to improve, will trickle its way down into the development community, and we'll start to see some additional development proposals. What's additionally nice to see is, you know, I recently did a show with the town council candidates, and some of them are saying that Londonderry still has a reputation of being a difficult community to work with for development, yet here we have a second subdivision that this developer wants to create. And, you know, we are certainly keeping the conversation flowing between Woodmont and ourselves and the community. So we would love to see, you know, more people involved. Express your opinions, come to these open houses that they're having, come to our meetings. We always have a time for public to speak.
Yep. I think the planning board has really done a nice job over the last several years in really trying to change the perception the town has had in terms of its perceived hostility to expanded development. I think between the study that was commissioned by the town council, done by MRI, some of the process improvements we've implemented over the last several years, and some of the zoning changes that we've adopted are certainly encouraging of appropriate economic development.
Right.
I think the key is the balance between getting appropriate economic development and making sure the interests of the community are protected in terms of our planning and zoning requirements. And
I think that's the point that keeps getting forgotten, that when the planning board looks at things, they look at how it's going to affect this community.
Correct.
And we want to make sure that that's utmost in our thoughts.
It's been an improving process. I'm closing in on my 12th year working for the town, and it's progressively gotten better and better in terms of the process and the attitude and the willingness of the board to be creative and to look at alternative solutions, and it truly has been a pleasure serving the community.
Well, Tim, it's been a pleasure working with you. I mean, it's been great. You've certainly taught me a lot, and I know I have much more to learn. Folks, we thank you for watching. This has been another edition, thank you, of Agenda Item. Please join us at the planning board meetings the first and second Wednesdays of the month, and, you know, watch us online. Thank you.